Stop motion beta team gang. Okay, so we're going to be looking at just navigating in Blender. So it's pretty it's actually not hard if somebody shows you. A lot of Blender is really isn't hard if somebody shows you. It's actually really quite fast. Um, so let's take a look, huh? So over here on our left, we have tools, and on the tools, we can see we have a bunch of options. I tend to use them all, actually. I do use select a lot, and I use tweak a lot as well. The next one is the 3D cursor, and you can see there's all tooltips and everything here. So that's always super handy. This thing here is called the 3D cursor. This is really handy if you're a 2D animator and you know how to maintain your volumes and all that business. So yeah, this is like super handy because basically if we hit the period key on the keyboard, we can tell just up here, we can say, hey, I want you to rotate around the active element, right? And so if I click on this and I say, hey, rotate, you can see here it's rotating around that pivot point. So the camera is really good for demonstrating this because everything converges back to that single point of perspective. So yeah, it's really good for that. So and then when you select a new tool, you can move it on individual axes, right? But the 3D cursor is super handy. So we just shift and right click and drag. And you can switch this to 3D cursor. Now when we rotate this, you can see it rotates around the 3D cursor. So if I shift the 3D cursor a little bit closer, a little bit closer. This is the good thing about Blender as well. Like it's kind of, as you move things around, you can kind of dial it in to get closer and closer. I don't know what kind of math they have done to do this, but like it's pretty impressive. Okay, so if we start rotating that now, you can see we can rotate around the 3D cursor. That is actually a really powerful way of working, in my opinion. And depending on how you set things up, it can, yeah, it can leave you being able to animate in a very flexible manner. That's what we really want to say. Okay, so let's delete that. So we can just select these things and we can just delete them. If I want this 3D cursor to go back to the center on the screen, basically if I just hit Shift S, I can say cursor to world origin and it's just going to snap back there. So let's navigate with our cube really quickly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate the cube by hitting Shift D. And then I'm going to select my move tool and I'm just going to move them. Okay, so basically here you can see now I'm moving only on the XY axis. And when you click on one of these little squares, so we've got a green square here, with a green square, a red square, and a blue square. When you click on one of those, basically you're saying, I move on every other axis except for the blue axis, which is Z, right? We can see that up here. And then here we're saying move on every other axis except the Y axis. And then again, the same, right? Move on every other axis except the X axis. And again, we can see that up here. So this is like super handy. And I think this is, yeah, only for move and scale. So if we just want to scale this way, then we can, right? If we want to scale this way, we can. So this is like uniform scaling and non-uniform scaling, basically. I think, yeah, and a scale cage. Look at that. How cool is that, huh? So that's super cool. Right, let's delete this box and focus back in on this again. So if, for example, we'll just put a lot of these boxes all over the place. So I've already talked to you about enabling the pie menu. I think it's under navigation, key maps, tab for pie. Okay, and I'm just going to switch this to tools and save preferences. Okay, so when I press the tab key, I'm going to have a bunch of different options. And so the really cool thing here is you can just go, and I'm hitting the tilde key on my keyboard. It's basically this little, this sign on your keyboard, right? And if you hit that, then it's going to give you a bunch of options for you to, to select from. So hitting the tilde key. Okay. So hitting the tilde key, you can see here there's a view selected. So if I'm rotating around and then I want to quickly view that one, then I can. And it's just a really good way to navigate around Blender. You can just zoom in on it. Also, there's an isolation, like an isolation mode. And basically that's the / key, or it's the question mark key. On my keyboard, it sits next to the less than and the greater than key on the bottom row. So Z, X, C, V, B, N, M, less than, greater than, and then question mark. And so basically that puts you into isolation mode. Okay, so that can also be really handy as well. In regards to moving around the timeline, how I am, basically middle click on your mouse button is rotate. Holding down control, middle click is zoom in, and shift is pan left and right. Okay, and then basically we have those same things here as well. So if your machine isn't supporting these kinds of gestures, then yeah, basically you can just use these buttons. And then also here we have a small little navigation system, and basically you can click in this circle and you can drag, and yeah, it's pretty handy actually. It's not too bad. Okay, so I'm just going to tap the front view, and this lets me know what's all here. So if I want to go through this tool here, right, cycle through the selection tools here. So what I can do is I can hit W on the keyboard, and that's just basically going to cycle you through. It's going to cycle you through all of the tools. So I like to be on the select lasso. So that's going to give me those tools, that selection. And then this gives me like my tweak tool, which I can just directly click on stuff. Then we have our box select, and then we have this little guy, which is really fun. And you can just like click and drag. So it's our select circle tool. And then it just basically takes you all the way through those tools again. Okay, so now that I've removed all those guys, we're going to start looking at how can we use Blender in a little bit more of an advanced way. So if we come up here and we don't want to see these viewport gizmos anymore, what we can do is we can turn them off. So usually I like to work and I like to turn all of these guys off. Okay, so we've just got a cube and we can't see any of our navigation controls, and you'll notice now we can't see any of our gizmos. So when we have our tools, when we have these three on, you can see it's highlighting and activating each one of these tools, right? So now all it's going to do is just show us the tool that we have selected. There's no navigation and we can't see these tools here. So this is where things can get a little bit interesting, right? You're just going to be using shortcuts here. So we've got G for move, we've got R for rotate, and we've got S for scale. So Shift D to duplicate a new box. So if we want to move, we can just hit G and we can move. Or we can hit G, middle mouse click and drag. And you can kind of see an axis pops up and you can drag along that axis. In my opinion, this is pretty intuitive and it's really good. And basically all you've got to do is kinesthetically pretend that you're trying to draw that cube along that particular axis, and Blender's able to predict which axis it's going to drag along. So if I want to drag along the x-axis, then I can drag it along the x-axis. If I want to drag it on the z, then you can see here I can drag it on the z. And then if I want to drag it along the x, so you can see here it becomes really intuitive really quickly. So Shift D and then middle click, and basically it's going to allow you to draw on that axis. And if you get an axis wrong, for example, like here I'm drawing the X, just give it a little move around and it will snap to a new axis. Okay, so pretty cool, huh? So that's the move tool. Okay, so the rotate is, oh, well, let's do the scale first. The scale is pretty fun. So S on the keyboard for scale, and that's kind of it, right? So same thing again, right? If we middle click, just move this over to here for a bit. Okay, so we've got our cube here and we want to scale on the Y. So again, S and just middle click, and we can see it can scale on the Y. Just move this to the side. So we're going to scale S and to the X. And we'll just, one more time, S and to the Z. Okay, so that's pretty simple. So now that we've done that, now we have a rotate. So I'm just going to move it up. And I'm just going to scale it up a little bit. So rotate's exactly the same. So R, and we're going to rotate on the X, rotate on the Y. Oh, sorry, that's rotating on the Y. Sometimes you may want to, nope, it's not going to let me do it, not today. Okay, so this is great because like in the circumstances that it's not letting you do it, what you can do with the navigation is you can say R, and then you can press Y on the keyboard for the axis it's going to rotate on. And you can see here now it's going to rotate on the Y. Or we can click the X and then we can start rotating, or we can click on the Z and we get that rotation as well. We can also click Shift Z, and now it's going to rotate just around the Z axis. And then if we go Shift Y, no, I think that only works for just the move tool. Okay, the other thing with the rotate tool is if you say for example, if you hit R twice, you get this kind of movement, which is basically a free form kind of movement, which is also really, really handy. So yeah, so it's really handy. So even here, still we can say RY, RY, and then you notice the axis is on the world axis when we want to rotate this, but we want to rotate this on the objects axis. So if you press Y again, you can see that now we can rotate on the Y. And then it's the same again. If we rotate on the X, we can see it's in the world axis. And then if we hit X again, it's going to be in the objects axis. Okay, and one more time, Z. And so now we can see it's local. So it's switching it from local mode, it's from world mode to local mode. Okay, other things that you guys will want to know based upon selection is basically, you know, what is, like how something may rotate. So you can do it based upon the bounding box. So if we do this here, yep. So if we do this one here, it's doing it from the center point. If we do it from the 3D cursor, we can see it's doing it from around the 3D cursor. If we're doing it from the individual origins, we can see just double tapping R, it's doing it from each object's origin point. So this is the little dot that's in the middle. So that's also super handy. The median point takes into consideration everything that is selected. And then we'll just, we don't want all those. We just want this one here. So to control, I usually control right click to do a lasso select. And so finally, we'll do the last one, active element and rotate. So rotate, rotate, rotate. So that's always super handy as well. So yeah, usually I use active quite a lot. The hotkey to get to that menu is basically the greater than key or the period key on your keyboard. And again, on my keyboard, this sits on Z, X, C, V, B, N, M, less than, greater than. This is the bottom row of characters. Yeah, and then you can just basically pick your menu. So that is the greater than or the period key. We won't bother, snapping, right? So basically turning on, turning off. And then these are just the options on where you're snapping to. So I use vertex quite a lot and edge and face a lot. It depends on what you're doing. So basically, as you right click and you just hold down the shift key, you can quickly snap your 3D cursor, you know, to different parts. So yeah, it works really well. Options, turn that off. Shift tab turns it off, on and off. Most of us are using styluses anyway, so just quickly, you know, dragging your mouse up there and clicking it on is actually super easy. So this is pretty intuitive. And then here, this is our soft selection. And so basically we have connected and non-connected options somewhere. Yeah, so if, say for example, I have this one here selected, and then I go grab, I'm only moving this one, right? But we can see when you click on a tool, basically, if I click on a tool, we can see we have all these options that come up in the bottom of the screen, and they're giving you different ways, different ways on how to how to make the selection bigger. So you can see here, just by middle mouse clicking, I can select more elements. So basically, this is your soft selection inside Blender. The way soft selection, I'm just gonna get rid of all this stuff. So I'm just gonna zoom in. So my tilde key and view select. Okay, and this is our object, right? So I'll just go into isolation mode by pressing the question mark key. And I'm just going to hit Control-3 on the keyboard. And basically what that does is it applies a subdivision surface. So I'm going to apply that. And we're just going to see how like soft selection works. So when I turn this on now, we can see it's affecting all of that. And then if I middle mouse click, you can see now we have this control. When you're in a mesh mode, you can choose to say whether you want it connected or not. In this instance, like say for example, we have a duplicated selection like this. If connected is not selected, when we have something and we have our selection operating like this, you can see it just treats all of the mesh data inside of the object as one. And then if you say connected, basically it just treats it this way. Yeah, because this is the object that you have selected, and there's nothing else connected to it, so this is all it moves. And then basically these are your fall-off types that it's using. So say for example, random is a pretty handy one, and you can see it just randomizes everything. We'll just zoom up. Okay, so it could be a really good way for when using stop motion to create motion blur, claymation motion blur. Okay, so let's get out of isolation mode by hitting the question mark key, and I'm just going to delete that. Okay, so Shift S, cursor to world origin, and I'm just going to turn off our soft selection or proportional editing. There you go. And that is pretty much the navigation for Blender. The final thing that I really want to say is when you are previewing your objects or materials inside of Blender, you can see we have all of this information. If you want to see everything in kind of a cleaner format, basically you can switch these on, and these are showing your like default colors, and this is basically turning off your gizmos. Okay, click dragging here just shrinks this down. T closes the tool panel and closes this panel here. If you don't want to see this information, you can hit show menus, show tool settings, show header, and then you can right click and you can get that information back anytime you want. So basically it's a little bit of navigation in Blender, and then finally adding seeing some different colors and textures to your objects in Blender. Basically this is your material object, and I'm just going to turn this on so I can see which object I have selected, and I'm just going to go through and I'm just going to just create a new material and change the color, new material on each one of these. Okay, new material. So basically I'm copying the previous material and then just changing it up. Let's go purple up. didn't do new material. Okay, undo, Control Z, and purple. Okay, so that is basically navigating in Blender. Oh, finally, we are like a viewport render or not the viewport render. Yeah, it just depends. So there's these world kind of settings here at the end. This is also a really handy mode as well, especially when you're doing cutout animation inside of Blender. Basically, you can set this to flat, and instead of random, what you can do is you can say a single color, and then you can force this to make a silhouette. So this is a really great way to get a good read on your character really, really quickly and see how your silhouette is looking. Yeah, so it's just a matter of setting it up once. So basically that's flat, single, and your default color. You can even change your world settings and your viewport settings to something heinously bright like this, if you want. So you can jump back and you can get your read on there. And if you don't want to burn your eyes out, you know, barbecue your eyes, you can just turn that right down. And it's just going to jump you in and out. So I'm just going to leave this on the theme, and I'm going to say that's it. Okay, guys, so thanks for this one, and I'll see you in the next one. All right.